Mainstream quantum physics already proved something that should have changed everything. At the subatomic level, matter doesn't exist as a solid object until an observer looks at it. Observation creates physical reality. That's the double slit experiment, and that's in the textbooks. And then we look up at the sky and we completely forget it. We go right back to believing that we're accidental specks of dust on a rigid rock flying through a dead vacuum. But the universe doesn't change its engineering principles just because the scale gets larger. So welcome to the source code. And I want to be clear about something before I start. What I'm about to present is my philosophy. It is theoretical, grounded in physics, and it's built on a foundation established by Lindsay Harris from Tomb of Illumination, whose electromagnetic cosmology work, I believe, represents some of the most important thinking happening anywhere right now. And I'm not asking you to believe this, I'm asking you to think about it and be open-minded. And we'll start with what mainstream physics already agrees on: an atom, a central positively charged nucleus surrounded by negatively charged electrons moving in concentric tracks, held together entirely by an electromagnetic field. The ancient axiom says, "as above, so below." That's not poetry, that's a scaling instruction. The universe doesn't change its engineering principles just because the scale gets larger, and we're going to drive that home. Lindsay Harris identified something that changes everything. Earth's magnetic field is not symmetrical. The northern hemisphere carries a magnetic strength of 3 times phi. The southern hemisphere carries 2 times phi. That phi ratio difference, the intentional asymmetry, is the creative potential energy of the entire system. And if you look at the IGRF magnetic field data documents, this asymmetry is documented. We documented ourselves in a physics paper with 3 out of 4 confirmed predictions, with the 4th just requiring more data. And if you want that, you can contact me and I will send it to you. So what are we actually looking at here? We're looking at a macro scale atomic dielectric toroidal system. The ground we stand on is not a rock flying through space. It's the plane of the dielectric inertia, the precise point in the toroidal field where the opposing magnetic pressures achieve equilibrium and create a perfectly stable stationary plane. This is documented physics. It exists in every toroidal field ever measured. We are standing on the neutral plane of a giant electromagnet. And at the center of this system, which is at the Arctic vortex, at the Arctic center, sits what Lindsay identifies as a black hole, not a theoretical construct. The source point, the singularity from which the entire projected system emanates. Every creation tradition on Earth begins the same way. In the beginning was the word, sound, frequency, because frequency precedes form. The north is the throne, and the throne is the throat, the acoustic source of the system turning at 15 degrees per hour. On the innermost track of this vortex, right at the event horizon of that black hole, sits the real plasma sun. Not the one we see in the sky, the source. It doesn't travel across the realm. It stays at the center. The planets, Mercury, Venus, Mars, Jupiter, Saturn, are electron charges of this atomic system. Their movement around the central proton sun is what generates and sustains the electromagnetic field of the entire realm. So, what are we seeing when we look up? Well, Lindsay's framework identifies the sun we observe as plasma manifestation, generated through magnetic induction at the tropics, where the 3 phi northern field meets the 2 phi southern field. The equatorial ionization anomaly documents exactly this. Mainstream geophysics calls it the fountain effect. Concentrated plasma forming a double-humped structure straddling the magnetic equator, the actinic line, the block wall of the sky. That anomaly is not a curiosity. That is the engine. As the central vortex turns at 15 degrees per hour, it carries this induction zone along the field lines, presenting the sun to each meridian in sequence. You're not watching a ball 93 million miles away. You're watching a localized plasma focal point being projected through the magnetic architecture of your local meridian onto your observer position, where you're the center of the universe. You're not a spectator, you're a node. Everything comes back to you. Like I said, every observer in this system is the center of their own perceptual universe. The sky renders equidistant to every observer because every observer is plugged into the same master electromagnetic source. This is why the globe model works mathematically as a navigation tool, because kinematic equivalence means the angular measurements produced by moving across this field are identical to what you would calculate on a curved surface with distant celestial objects. The globe didn't capture the physical truth. It captured the mathematical output of the field and mapped it into a rigid sphere. It's a functional user interface. It's not the source code. What about the southern sky? Well, the southern sky follows the same principle. Lindsay's framework identifies the southern celestial rotation as a mirror reflection of the northern vortex, cast onto the curved boundary of each observer's local meridian. When two observers, thousands of miles apart, both look south and see the same rotation, they're not looking at a single physical object. They're each receiving the mirror projection of that same northern source. It's rendered locally through their individual meridian field geometry. And your compass in the deep south is not pointing towards a physical pole. It's following the curved field lines of the asymmetric magnetic bottle, which due to the extreme declination at the southern periphery curves into a lateral arc. You believe you're traveling outward, but the geometry of the field is looping you around the boundary of the system. So you think you're going south, but it's pulling you west because the field lines are curved. Why does the mainstream education teach a globe instead of this? Because teaching this requires the kind of thinking that doesn't fit into the standardized industrial society. The globe model is extraordinarily efficient societal software. It takes a deeply complex, observer-dependent electromagnetic reality and compresses it into a rigid, predictable, three-dimensional sandbox that everyone can navigate without understanding a single thing about the underlying mechanics. Einstein himself showed that space and time are not absolute. They're observer-dependent. Special relativity is taught as an advanced abstraction reserved for physics majors. But Newtonian physics, which assumes space is a flat, rigid box, is what we use to build roads and fly planes. Not because it's true, because it's useful. The globe is the Newtonian approximation of a relativistic electromagnetic reality. Lindsay's model is not in conflict with the math. It explains why the math works. So this is my philosophy. It's built on Lindsay Harris's electromagnetic cosmology framework, and I believe it is the most coherent description of observable reality I've ever encountered. I present it not as a demand for your belief, but as an invitation to look past the rendered graphics and ask, what's running underneath the system? How is this happening? Why are we here? What is creating reality? The universe is not a dead vacuum you're accidentally drifting through. It is a living, self-generating electromagnetic system, and you are not a passenger in it. You're a node of the source itself, experiencing its own creation from the inside out. And that's the grand illusion.